Welcome to this special session for MA Sociology students in particular on participant observation and ethnography. Now, before we go on to what participant observation is all about, let's start with what social science knowledge is in a general sense and what sociological knowledge is in a particular sense. Now, we often hear people say about sociology in particular, oh, this is common sense knowledge. We already knew it. When we talk about family and family structures in a sociological sense, our peer group, our general public always says, oh, but we know about it. So let's first distinguish, let's first make a distinction, make a line of separation between what can be called commonsensical knowledge or common sense and what can be called sociological knowledge. The first slide here explains you this. You see, common sense knowledge is that which is often taken for granted knowledge. We take it for granted. It is derived from long drawn human experience, right? And I will give you examples for this so you would know how what distinguishes common sense knowledge from sociological knowledge. But please understand that common sense knowledge is often taken for granted. It is derived from human experience, from prolonged human experience, and the intention of common sense knowledge, or the main objective of common sense knowledge, is to be able to cope with routines of daily life, to be able to cope with what happens to us and what we undergo and what confronts us in a general sense on an everyday basis. Naturally then, when we have said that common sense knowledge is taken for granted, it is derived from human experience, and it has to deal with coping mechanisms of day-to-day existence, naturally then we would expect, and rightly so, that common sense knowledge is often, or it would often be, inconsistent and contradictory. It may not be a product of deliberate or rigorous thought. It is not born out of consistent, systematic process. Contrast this with sociological knowledge, which goes beyond the ritual stock of knowledge, which goes beyond what appears to the eye on first sight. It is an objective assessment of the social world, and in a moment I will tell you how it is different from common sense. More importantly, because sociological knowledge is obtained, is derived, is the output of those who are specialized in a discipline. Common sense knowledge is that which the people engage in, or which the people deal with, or which the people themselves produce on a day-to-day basis and over a period of time. Common sense knowledge, on the other hand, is that kind of knowledge which is generated, which is produced, which is made available and amenable through a process. It is based on certain sociological facts. It is based on discovery, on research into a particular community or a group of communities, and the generalizations drawn from those studies constitute the basis of sociological knowledge. So the whole process of arriving at sociological knowledge is different. The aim here is not to cope with day-to-day affairs of daily life. The aim is to be able to explain how social reality actually operates, how it actually works. Evidently and surely then it is amenable, it is available, it is available, anyone can doubt it, anyone can question it, and this then forms the basis of further research. If there is no questioning, then surely there will be no further research. After all, what is research? Research arises when we are thirsty to find out new facts, to determine new facts. And when does that happen? When we challenge the older order, when we doubt the older order, then we have the capability or the ability to generate new facts. And new facts are generated out of research. Now, we have been saying that sociological knowledge is the output of research. That's what I have just said. Now, how does this research take place, and what are the distinguishing features of research in the discipline of, say, sociology and its sister discipline, social anthropology. After all, there must be ways in which sociological knowledge or anthropological knowledge is derived from a specialized way of research. The distinguishing feature of sociological research, more so anthropological research, is participant observation. Now, what is participant observation? First of all, let's understand what is observation at all. Is observation the same as seeing? Are they synonymous? No. There is a difference. And the difference is that while one can just see something casually, observation has a deeper connotation. The connotation is it is systematic viewing with a purpose. Now, when you sit at the railway station, what are you doing? A lay person sits at the railway station waiting for a train, say. Is he or she seeing, or is he or she observing? Well, he or she could also be observing, right? He or she could be seeing, which many of us do. We casually see people, things, events, and do not take great note of it. No, what meets the eye is what we see. But when we have a particular idea in mind and we begin to see closely, systematically, that is observation. Having understood this, let's see what participant observation is. Well, participant observation involves developing a close relationship with the people, learning the language of the people, living among the people, and taking part in the day-to-day routines of the people themselves, observing and recording aspects of society through first-hand experience. What does this entail? How can this be possible? We said we have to develop a close relationship with the people. Now, how can close relationship with the people be developed at all? And what happens to that kind of relationship? Learning the language is all right. We do learn many languages in the course of our lives, and it's easy. It's easier than developing a close relationship. Well, participant observation actually entails a researcher living among the people he or she has set out to study, which means that in that period of time, ideally, a researcher lives with the people. The question that automatically comes to mind is, what is the duration? How long should a person ideally stay, as we say in sociology, in the field? Well, the ideal duration of staying in the field is 1 year. And the reason for stipulating 1 year as the minimum duration of field work is that it's experienced, it is found out that during a period of 1 year is good enough is optimum to develop a close relationship with the people. Also, not just being able to develop a close relationship with the people, but you see, throughout the year there are certain events. There are, if you're studying the agricultural cycle, for instance, and the life associated with the agricultural cycle, or more simply put, suppose one sets out, or a sociologist or an anthropologist sets out to study the farming community. Now, unless a person stays for a full agricultural cycle, it would be difficult to grasp the nuances of everyday life, because the agricultural cycle, the lifestyle of the people is closely related with the agricultural cycle. So unless the whole cycle is completed, how would a researcher be able to observe and understand, say, the festivals, the kind of social interactions that take place, the kind of cuisine that is prepared, and all that which gets associated with festivals in different times of the year. This is not true just for the agricultural community, right? It is true the period of fieldwork as 1 year is stipulated for all communities minimum, because it is said that in this period of time, in about a year's time, it is possible to acquire sufficient familiarity, 1. 2, in that period of 1 year, different aspects of society, different aspects of daily living get unfolded. If you go to stay in a community for say about a month, people may be at their best behavior or people may be at their worst behavior. But that's not the optimum, and that's not the way they lead their daily lives. The kind of the researcher's presence gets diluted over a period of time. People become less conscious of the researcher and get to lead their lives in a normal course, for which is very important for the researcher to observe and see and understand. Now, we have said what participant observation involves. Let's move on to the whole technique of participant observation. And here I will quote the words of an anthropologist. His name was Evans Pritchard, and he wrote this in 1962 about participant observation as such, the technique of participant observation. And Evans Pritchard said that the researcher goes to live for some months or years among a people. He lives among them as intimately as he can and learns to speak their language, to think in their concepts, and to feel in the values. He then lives the experience over again, critically and interpretively, in the conceptual categories and values of his own culture and in terms of general body of knowledge in his discipline. In other words, he translates from one culture to another. Clearly, Evans Pritchard is saying, and this has already been said, that the researcher goes and stays in the people, learns to speak in their language, learns to think in their categories. All that is all right. But there is a new point that Evans Pritchard has raised, and that is that Evans Pritchard says that the researcher goes back and reflects on those experiences all over again, and then tries to place those experiences in the general body of knowledge of the discipline itself, and then arrives at generalizations. Now, what it actually, or in operational terms, what does it mean? It means that the researcher, after collecting the knowledge, after collecting the information, goes back, goes through his notes or her notes, and then makes sense of those notes, places them in the theoretical framework or the analytical framework of the discipline of sociology, and prepares an account of it. And I will tell you that this account is called ethnography. What ethnography is, of course, we will push this for some time. Let's understand first what participant observation in detail is all about. Now, does it mean that a researcher goes to the field, sits there, participates in the lives of people, and comes back, says nothing, speaks nothing, just sings their songs, talks to them, helps them with the, say, farming or herding or whatever, and comes back? Is that participant observation fully? No. Because there is more to participant observation in operational terms, right? Now, I said a few minutes ago that the researcher develops an intimate relationship with the people as part of participant observation. There are two very significant points that should be clarified at this stage itself. What is meant by this intimate relationship with the people? What does it mean? Does it mean the person would say marry the people, marry one of the community members? That's intimate relationship. Or he or she will tell out all her secrets. What is meant by this intimacy? And what is this relationship, this intimate relationship actually called? Well, this intimate relationship is a very technical kind of a relationship, in the sense that it is a very fine balance between deep friendship and professional relationships that you see in offices. Which means that in actual functioning terms, the researcher is not a friend in the sense that he or she will pour out the secrets, open the heart out before the informants, and expect the informants to open themselves up completely and have a heart-to-heart talk. That's not what is referred to by the term intimate relationship. One. The second point that I want to tell you straight away is that this intimate relationship, in technical language or in sociological language to be more precise, is called rapport. It is written as R-A-P-P-O-R-T, but the T is silent. It is pronounced as rapport. So there is a rapport between the researcher and the people. Now, how is this rapport established? And what are the features of this rapport? And after all, what is the need for this rapport? You see, if a person comes to our house and says, I am from this university, or I am from this place, and I am doing my research, and I want data from you on this topic, would you and me let the person in? Would we be happy answering the questions? Would we agree to answer the questions? Many of us will not. Many of us would say, well, come some other time, I have to go somewhere, or we will give some other reason. That's because we have not established, the researcher, the person who has come, has not established a relationship with us. He or she is a stranger, and we don't want to open ourselves before strangers. But just imagine if the same person, we know the person through someone else, and the person carries someone's recommendation, say the president of the Resident Welfare Association or someone brings him or her to us and says, well, this is a person I know very closely, he or she wants very little information, could you help him? Even then, in the first instance, many of us may not, or we may not speak truth about ourselves many times. We may hide information, we may not tell completely, but over a period of time, and remember 1 year, over a period of time, we tend to loosen up. We tend to develop faith and confidence in a person and tell him or her the correct information and in as much detail as he or she wants, especially if the person begins to participate in our lives. Right? This is what rapport establishment is. What does a person do when he or she enters the field and has been instructed by the teacher to do participant observation? How would such a person start? The person would, it depends from field situation to field situation for sure, right? But if we are talking of, say, a study in a village, for instance, there are two important issues. One, the researcher can approach the people either through the sarpanch or through some other acquaintance that he or she may have in the village. Right? This is one. The other is, village societies are often known to be governed greatly by caste relations. There was an anthropologist, a very, very eminent anthropologist, M.N. Srinivas, who was a Brahmin himself, went out to study a village community. And he admits that by virtue of his being a Brahmin, he could not get much data about the non-Brahmins, particularly those who were treated as outcasts of the village. Similarly, it could have been the other way around. The person may not have access to data from, say, upper castes. So, it is very important to be able to recognize that there is a difference, that these nuances or these fine aspects of community life govern the level of participation. The level of participation is also governed, as I have just told you, by the power structures that operate in the village. Right? The sarpanch, for instance, will take a researcher to the houses that he would favor or she would favor more than others. Right? So, these are the aspects that one must recognize as critical elements in participant observation. Now, along with participant observation, along with just observation as participants in a community life or in the life of a community, what are the other techniques that sort of enhance the output that one would get from participant observation? And I told you that it's not enough to just go to a community and participate in the lives of people, observe and come back and say, I have done participant observation. No, because you need data. After all, by helping them with their work or participating in their daily lives and observing their functioning on a day-to-day basis, you will get only certain kinds of data. But then you also need to ask them questions to get data on other aspects. Right? How do you do that? Well, for that, there are techniques of, say, interviews. There are techniques of the questionnaire, case studies, genealogies, and a large number, life histories, all of those. Right? Now, we can come back to the techniques that help or extenuate the output of participant observation, but coming back to participation and participant observation, let's now look at what participant or participation in the daily lives of people would lead to. Well, participation in daily lives of people would lead to a level of understanding, trust and confidence that is not possible through any other means. It would lead to sharing of information that would otherwise not be possible, and it would enhance, it would open up the possibility of assessing the gap between what people say and what they actually do, and it will provide access to the insider's view and to the imponderabilia of life. Let's go through each of these one by one. I said that participant observation, participation in the daily lives of people leads to trust and confidence and a level of understanding that is not possible through any other means. Now this we have been talking about. This I have been telling you for a long time, that the kind of trust and the kind of understanding and the kind of confidentiality in a person that develops over a period of time and through participation of the researcher in the lives of the people is not possible through any other means. That is all right. And we understood this also through an example of a researcher entering our house absolutely unguarded and wanting information. Then we say participant observation or participation in the lives of people leads us to enables us to assess the gap between what people say and what people do. Now remember, there is ourselves that we present before others, and there is also a self of others that we do not want others to know. There are things that we say we do, but we actually don't do. Both of these are important for the researcher. It is also important for the researcher to know what are the situations under which people will actually do what they say, and what forces them to do what they normally don't utter before others. So this gap is available or becomes amenable only when the person participates in the life of a community, right? So while one questions them, what do you do in such a situation, what would you do? When he or she participates in their lives, that one realizes that no, in this situation this person did not do this. He or she said he would do, but he went the other way, did not do it. Okay, so then the ultimate objective of participant observation then is to grasp the native's point of view. After all, we actually ultimately, what do we want? We want to know how the other person thinks, how the people of a community think. How do they relate to world, and what is their vision of the world? That is what is critical to us. This is the objective of participant observation. The other objective of participant observation is to understand the organizational features of culture and the relationships between its constituent elements. Now this is very important, because no amount of questioning can lead you to actual explaining how a culture is actually definitely organized. How is it that relationships actually operate in day-to-day lives? How is, say, the economy related to social relations? What is the social significance of a gift made on a particular occasion? So these are the organizational principles, or say how the principles of kinship actually operate in real life situations. This is possible through participant observation, through noting of actual functioning of the culture. Now, but then how do we determine if a researcher has acquired the insider's view at all or not? We have said that this a researcher should do, but has he or she been able to do it? How do we determine it? Well, we can determine it by two means. One is, the researcher should be able to account for the cultural phenomena from the point of view of the insider and from the analytical and outsider's point of view. Now there are two things that one is saying here. The first is that the researcher is able to account for or offer explanation about a cultural phenomena the way the informants would do. That is one explanation, one level of explanation that the researcher should be able to give. The other explanation the researcher should be able to give is from the analytical point of view. Remember, we had said in the beginning itself that I had quoted Evans Pritchard saying that the researcher, after acquiring information and knowledge from the community, actually goes back to his own community or her own community or her own discipline and tries to analyze what he or she has gained from the field situation. So, and the example that will clarify this well enough is that of the Azande tribesmen. Now, Azande is a tribe in Africa, North and Central Africa. Suppose a granary falls or collapses and kills a person sleeping in its shade, right? There is a granary, a person is sleeping in its shade among the Azande. and the granary falls. The person is killed, person dies. The researcher should be able to give the Azande explanation of this phenomenon and also be able to give, say, the Englishman's view of it. The Englishman view would be that the granary collapsed because of some white ants and it was a sheer accident, right? But the Azande, the people, the community, the tribesmen would not give this explanation alone. They would not accept it. They would be more interested in why did the granary fall or collapse on this particular person itself. The Englishman can rebuff it and say, well, it was an accident, it could be anybody. The Azande would say, no, it had to be this person. The cultural explanation or the explanation that the Azande would give about it would be that, well, it could be the white ants, but along with the white ants, it could have been work of witchcraft. So this, when a researcher is able to give these two levels of explanation, one of the outsider and one of the insider adequately, that it is believed, it is said that a researcher has sufficiently participated in the lives of the people whom he or she has set out to study. Now, having done all the participant observation, having gone to the field, stayed there, learnt their language, learnt to think in their categories, learnt their explanations, learnt everything, what is the output? To what end? The researcher goes back and writes a detailed account of the culture that he or she had set out to study. Now, this detailed account obtained after participant observation for 1 year is called ethnography. In more formal terms, ethnography is a research process in which the anthropologist closely observes, records, and engages in the daily life of another culture and then writes accounts of this culture, emphasizing the descriptive detail. Now, is ethnography then different from participant observation, or is it the same thing? Well, a large number of anthropologists tend to treat participant observation and ethnography at the same level. In that sense, ethnography is both a research method and the outcome of research. Okay? Now, it says that the written detailed account is called ethnography. And I will tell you the major tenets or the major features of ethnography. Well, the basic ideal of ethnography is to obtain laws and regularities of all cultural phenomena. Now, this means that while a researcher is participating in the lives of people, there are many things, there are many accounts, there are many phenomena that he or she observes and keeps writing them down very closely. Is that ethnography? Well, that would contribute to the writing of ethnography. When a researcher is in the field and doing participant observation and doing the interviews, doing the questioning, using the techniques of questionnaire and interview and schedule and case histories and genealogies and case studies and everything, the objective is to take the data and go through that data in detail and be able to arrive at generalizations, at laws, at regularities about that culture. Now, it's not enough. It's not of interest to say or to read in an ethnography that in the village there were 10 families. First family celebrated Diwali in this way, and you give a very, very detailed description. Next page. Family 2 celebrates Diwali in this way, and you again have a very long list, and similarly you have 10 pages of descriptions about Diwali for each family in the house, in the village. Would you be interested, or would it be of any use? Well, to some of us it could be, because we would see the variation, how one family differs from the other family. But what we actually want to know is how Diwali is celebrated in a particular village. So then, what does it mean? It means that out of those detailed descriptions about 10 families, we need to draw generalizations. We need to say, well, broadly, the 10 families do this on Diwali. Or say, out of 10, a majority of them, say about 8 of them, do this. However, 2 of them do not do this. Instead, they do something else. And you tell what it is. Now, this is of greater interest, and this is what is meant when I said that the basic ideal of any ethnography is to obtain laws and regularities of all the cultural phenomena. The other objective of ethnography is that each phenomena is studied through the broadest range possible. So it's not that you set out to study one aspect of social reality or you focus on that completely. The objective is to be able to draw generalizations, to be able to show how one aspect of social life is connected with another aspect of life, social life, and how they are integrated and connected with other aspects of social life. That is what is of interest, and that is the whole objective of undertaking this arduous task of doing participant observation and writing an ethnography. The fundamental assumption then, when I say that the objective is to be able to show integration and connectedness among different aspects of social life, then obviously the fundamental assumption then is that cultures are actually integrated wholes with their parts connected in subtle and explicit means within the whole. Unless we make that assumption, unless we understand, accept that different aspects of culture are connected to each other, that we will not be able to write an integrated ethnography. Unless I believe, unless I accept that say economics the functioning of economics or economic life of people is related with, say, their political life, is related with their aesthetic life, that it will not be possible for me to show the connections. Right? And the last objective is that the ethnographer needs to point out and describe the connections between institutions and situate them in the context of culture as a whole. Right? So we have to accept that culture is constituted of different components that are connected with each other. And it is these connections that we should be able to show in an ethnography. What then? Naturally, when we have worked out the objectives of ethnography and how ethnography should be done, one tends to think, what is an ideal ethnography? Right? And I have a quote from Malinowski on this. Malinowski, by the way, is regarded as the founding father of ethnography. He studied the Trobriand Islanders in Papua New Guinea. And he actually went and stayed there, and that set the tone and that set the tradition of participant observation thereafter. So Malinowski is regarded as the founding father of ethnography, and Malinowski has stated that he considers, and he says, I consider that only such ethnographic sources are of unquestionable scientific value in which we can clearly draw the line between, on the one hand, the results of direct observation and of native sentiments and interpretations, and on the other, the inferences of the author based on his common sense and psychological insight. This is what we have been saying, that the author has to integrate, has to bring together the viewpoint of the natives and the viewpoint that emerges out of his own or her own engagement with the discipline of sociology and anthropology. Now, what are the milestones? After all, ethnography, there have been in the whole history of sociology, there have been many ways in which ethnographies have been written. And let's go on to the milestones in ethnography. The first is, it all began with positivist ethnography. You see, because sociology came as a discipline after the Enlightenment. Auguste Comte, the father of sociology, propounded the philosophy of positivism, which was greatly influenced by the philosophy of natural sciences. And we know that the thrust of positivism was on the discovery of social laws. Remember, positivism, Auguste Comte gave the laws of society. So, in that period of positivism, when positivist philosophy was at its peak, the ethnography, the emphasis in ethnography was on objective and quantifiable information. Ethnography was intended to produce objective information, which means that the role of the researcher was minimized. The researcher was just required to report the information as it would happen. Right. Now, this phase of positivist ethnography was taken over by humanist, realist ethnography, which accepted that over time, obviously, positivism as a philosophy declined and there were other ideas that emerged. It came to be accepted that social world can be interpreted by people, and that it is all the life, the whole life of people is not always available for observation as an external component of existence, because there are many aspects of life that cannot be observed, that can be articulated in practice but cannot be observed. So, like one can go to a laboratory and observe phenomena or conduct an experiment, it came to be recognized that in society this is not always possible. Right? That there are aspects that are not, that you cannot observe and take note of and write down and write a big ethnography about it. The other point that was accepted was that people develop a knowledge and an understanding of their social world, which may be treated as a starting point of research. Now, while the positivist ethnography was emphasized information that was quantifiable, that could be shown to other people, that could be experimented with, the humanist, realist ethnography, or that period, accepted that there is an understanding about themselves that the people have, and which is critical to the researcher who goes to study them. In the natural, it was also accepted that the natural setting or the social context in which people live provides actually the context for their whole social life, and which needs to be taken note of. Now, these were two phases in the trajectory of ethnography. There was a third phase. This phase is called the interpretive ethnography, in which the starting point, now it takes off from the humanist realist perspective, and it accepts that the interpretations provided by the informants are very important. These are the starting points in the ethnographic inquiry, and these, after these are collected, that data are collected to fill up these interpretations. The other aspect, or very important aspect of interpretive ethnography, is the element of reflexivity. Now, element of reflexivity means that the researcher goes to the field with his or her own bias and his or her own understanding of social life, of the social world that he or she has set out to study. The researcher's own experience also goes into his or her interpretation of the social reality. So, in interpretive ethnography, it is both the reflexivity or the subjectivity of the researcher and the interpretations of the informants. When these are tied up to produce a whole, that is interpretive ethnography. Which means that two people who set out to study the same, say the village or the same community, could produce different ethnographies because they have their own different experiences and their own interpretations of reality. Well, this is also the postmodernist ethnography. Well, I hope with this ethnography and participant observation as methods of research are clear. Thank you.